This is the most comfortable sweater I've ever owned. I'm actually kind of sad that it's starting to warm up now because like I hate the fact that I can't wear the sweater when it gets warm. It feels so nice. I feel so snug. Anyway, so you guys have been doing what I call research in the wild. You guys have been following topics on, general media, following trends, trying to get an idea of what's going on in the world. Now, we've talked a little bit about the bias that exists pretty much inherent in all forms of media. And you should be aware of that as you've been following subjects that, it gets pretty apparent. Well, what is most of your news trying to do? It's trying to sell you something, right? It's at the very least, news is basically trying to drive clicks. They want people to read it so that you get exposed to ads. That's how they make money. So, for the most part, the big goal for most media companies is obviously to make a profit. They have ways of doing that. Now, what we're going to talk about next is going to put us into a completely different world, and it's going to throw you into a bit of a new environment as far as your research and your topics goes. We've got a pretty good foundation to write a paper using all of this environment. I call it environmental scanning. It has a lot of different names. That was what it was called when I was a younger man doing research. Now it's just kind of been absorbed into the media environment. We all internalize and read news very much, and it's been integrated into most of our typical internet behavior, right? It's just for the purpose of this assignment, I've kind of like tapped into that natural kind of curiosity, and we all have our own networks that we build and cultivate. I'm being boring. David, stop being boring. It's about to get even more boring though, so you might want to strap yourself in for this. Now, the state of Georgia, when we teach English, we must utilize something called scholarly articles. We have to use scholarly material within our research. So it's going to be extremely important for us to just have a talk of what that is for a little while so you know what it is you're searching for and how to find it. Now, I have yet to go and grade all of the material for these data reports that you've been writing. So I hope to have that loaded into the system in the next week or so. And like I've said before, so far, the stuff that you've written, I'm not going to be too terribly difficult with, right? I mean, we were just literally laying a foundation. But now we're starting to get a little bit more technical, and we're starting to get a little bit more into the weeds, because scholarly articles really up the game. So for this particular lecture, we're just going to talk about what this world is, how it operates, and what you should expect as you start looking for these. Now, when I say a scholarly article, what I'm talking about there is the type of writing that is produced in academia, in colleges and universities. Now, most people don't realize that when you start teaching at the college level, this doesn't necessarily include technical colleges. Okay, I'm starting to get hot. I got to take this off now. This does not include technical colleges, but when you're teaching at like a 4-year institution or at a university, when you're trying to compete for tenure, one of the things that you absolutely have to do is you have to publish, right? We had a word for this when I was in grad school. It's called publish or perish. Your pay, your prestige, your ability to hold a job and advance in your career is not necessarily tethered to your ability to teach. It's tethered to your participation in scholarly discussion. I might just realize my video is really blurry and it's kind of bugging me. Like, I hate that. Anyway, so the type of writing that you're trying to get published as a teacher or as a scholar is not in magazines, not in any of the popular stuff that you've been reading that I've sent you out to collect. These are things that are published at colleges and universities, and they typically follow a very specific academic discipline. So some examples of these. If you were to look for scholarly journals, you would find some about medicine, about engineering, history, literature. I'm sure there's a few out there about cosmetology. A lot of the a lot of the vocational programs that we hear at the college have some type of journal, right? That where the practice is advanced in discussions of people who are, very, very versed and educated about those things. The people who are writing to publish in those journals are supposed to be experts in the field. So people who have their PhDs, people who are in graduate school, people who are doing research. Now, the interesting thing about these is they are what we call peer reviewed. Now, when I was in school, we had a lot of these peer review exercises where we would get together with people in the class and we would try to edit each other's papers. I absolutely hated those exercises, and most people do, because we don't really have a good ability to edit each other's work if we're taking a writing class. We might be able to give each other feedback, and we might be able to discuss and develop a paper together. But very rarely would I trust somebody, in a class. If you were one of my students in a face-to-face class, I don't want you correcting each other's grammar. That's completely and totally, insane to me. That's not the purpose of real actual peer review. Peer review in the academic sense means that you get some people who are absolutely expert, top of their field scholars. You get them together, people who have reputations, people who have been in the field for years and years, and you form an editorial board, a group of people who get together, review paper submissions to a journal, and they decide to publish some of these academic papers. It is supposed to be like the cream of the crop, to quote Macho Man Randy Savage, the cream of the crop, right? I got to throw something like that in every once in a while to make sure you're still awake. In any case, appearing in an academic journal is kind of a big deal because a group of Poindexters have to come together, read your paper, and say, all right, this is worth publishing. So since this is an editorial board of people who are supposed to be experts in the field, this is supposed to be pretty good stuff. We're supposed to assume that things that are published in these journals, it's a cut above the rest. Now, there's a few issues that rise up when I start getting students to use academic journals. The writing that exists in academic journals has much less of an incentive to be entertaining. This is not CNN. This is not National Geographic. This is not Bob's Civil War history and moonshine recipes, right? This is a bunch of PhDs who are trying essentially to impress other PhDs, trying to make themselves stand out amongst a group of people who are supposed to be the elites of the subject. It is this writing is under no obligation to fight for your interests. It's just not. It's also, when you think about the type of writing you run into on CNN, Fox News, a lot of times that writing is, people would say dumbed down. It's really not. I would refer to it as universalized, right? It's meant to be readable for a very wide audience. Now, that's not dumbing down. It's meant to be kind of, if I'm trying to understand something about mathematical, theoretical physics, blah, 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 I'm pretty much not going to be able to understand a paper that's published in a physics journal because I don't have the knowledge with which to access that. I got to watch one of these GPB, public television documentaries where they're like, imagine if the universe was in a sandwich and you take a bite out of that sandwich. And when you take that bite out of that sandwich, you get the taste of all the elemental stuff that existed in the universe in the form of the pastrami and of the pickles. I know, too much caffeine. That's the kind of universalization I would need to access that subject. And, stupid me sitting on my couch, I'm taking this joke from a stand-up comedian, but stupid me sitting on the couch eating my Pringles like, oh yeah, I totally understand the stuff that Einstein was getting at. So it's not dumbing down, it's universalizing. These academic journals don't universalize. They are making the assumption that they are talking to experts in the field. So these academic journals are going to be loaded with jargon. Now, I actually had to define this the other day when I was teaching the face-to-face class. It's kind of cool teaching face-to-face classes and online classes at the same time, because I teach the face-to-face classes, and then sometimes I kind of know what kind of questions you guys would ask if you were face-to-face. Jargon is very specific words that are really only used by people who are in the know of a subject. So me being a literature instructor, I'm very likely to use words like theoretical, post-structuralism, or formalism, or psychoanalysis. These are all things that, as a literature person who is participating in the conversation about literature, you would assume that other literature people would understand what you're talking about. If I sit down at a table with a bunch of people who weld for a living and I start asking their opinion about third wave feminism, I'm the idiot if I expect them to be like, sure, I know all about that. No, that's not their native context, right? It's very kind of it's inappropriate for me to approach people and expect them to have that background. I went to school for years and years to learn that crap, right? Crap. Feminism is not crap. Jesus. I love these video lectures. Anyway, that material is something it took me a long time to learn about and to master. It's inappropriate for me to assume that other people have that knowledge. But when you're reading these scholarly articles, you are in essence jumping into the absolute, you're being thrown to the wolves, is what I'm trying to say. The jargon is going to be a headache depending on what subject you're researching. So you need to keep that in mind. Reading an article off Galileo, and I need to explain what Galileo is in a minute. I sometimes use these things interchangeably. Reading a scholarly journal is going to take a lot of mental effort, because you probably are not going to be aware of a lot of the stuff that they're talking about, because scholarly articles also are, part of a conversation that's been going on for years and years and years and years. So it behooves these professors and these experts to get these publications, because without these publications, their careers suffer, right? So how do you get published then? And again, I know I'm kind of getting off the beaten path, but this kind of stuff is really, really interesting to me. So how do you get published in these things? Well, there's a couple of ways. First and foremost, you can actually try to discover something that no one's ever seen before, and you're trying to draw attention to it. When I was at Georgia Southern, there was a professor who got like a grant to go to Britain and rifle through the personal letters of a very well-known poet. And he was constantly trying to connect stuff of her poetry to her letters to say, oh, well, this is obviously where she got this idea for this poem. That's one way to get published. Another way to get published is to kind of have a radically new idea about something, to a new way to interpret it, right? And another way is to disagree with something that somebody else has said. And I would actually point out that might be the easiest way, is to just call out someone else for being wrong. You get published like that. And, little known fact, oftentimes, one of the things you have to show when you're trying to prove your publication record is not just the fact that you've gotten into these journals. You also have to show that you've been cited by other people, that you're participating in an academic conversation. So why am I telling you all this? I'm telling you all this because academic journals are a really, really annoying thing to read, because you're jumping into a world that is moving extremely fast and has largely been kind of blocked off for you. You find these scholarly journals typically using some type of statewide database. Our database here in Georgia is Galileo. Now, you should be able to access Galileo by going online and logging onto Blackboard. When you log onto Blackboard with your credentials, you should be able to see a link to Galileo in Blackboard, and that should take you directly to it. It used to be you had to have a password to access it, and you got that password basically from the librarian at the school. They sent it out usually in an email, in your school email, when you would, start classes. We don't necessarily have to do that anymore. It's part of single sign-on, which is kind of cool. It makes things a little easier for you. When you get onto Galileo, that's the search engine. Our school, all of the technical colleges, all the post-secondary institutions, things like colleges, universities, use Galileo. They buy subscriptions to these academic journals, and then you can search all the journals that your institution has subscribed to in order to try to find stuff for your assignments. And different institutions are going to have different subscriptions to different databases and thus different journals. Typically, the bigger the school you go to, the more access you have. I was a really big fan of JSTOR when I was in graduate school. I mean, nothing against Galileo. Galileo has improved a lot since I was in grad school. I always found JSTOR to be really useful. It was a very easy to use database. Galileo was very, very finicky when I was in grad school. It's definitely improved. I mean, Galileo's been around a long time. I think it might predate Google, which is just absolutely mind exploding when I think about it. In any case, I need to get back on topic. This is just such a history lesson I'm giving you here. Galileo will give you access to these journals. It used to be that, here I go history again. It used to be when you had to go to the library to browse the collection of periodicals that were scholarly, and you actually had to find the actual physical copies of these things in order to cite for these assignments. You guys have it really good. Galileo, there's a lot of criticism I could throw at Galileo for a variety of different things, but it does make your life easier. Imagine actually having to go to my librarian people are going to throw a brick at me for saying this. For my online people, imagine actually having to go to a physical location, the library, just to do the research for your assignments. That was the world that I lived in when I was at grad school. It's really weird. I still think of myself as the cool hip guy teaching at the college. As I got through college early, I was teaching college at age 22. It's creepy. I was teaching college. No, I was teaching college at 26. Anyway, where was I going with this? Jeez. 17 minutes into this video just about Galileo. Why am I so interested in this? Anyway, I used to actually have to go to the library and look stuff up when I was in grad school. I used to go to the library, just browse the academic journal section in order to write my papers. I kind of miss those days, but I wouldn't wish that on anyone. You had to be very much in that kind of, you had to be into that sort of thing to enjoy it. I wouldn't wish it on anyone, but I really enjoyed just being in a stuffy old library, flipping through indexes, looking for stuff, for like obscure stuff about Hamlet and Shakespeare. Anyway, I'm going to try to finish this video up so that we guys can kind of get started on something new. And I might just actually skip a discussion question for today, because I'm going to follow this up with something else on Thursday. So I might just kind of give you guys a little bit of a break. But Galileo gives you access to scholarly material. So you guys have been doing research on these topics. You've been writing these information reports. Now we have to inject some scholarly material into the discussion. That is going to be a pain because of the nature of these articles. Now, I'm telling you this because basically you're going to have to actually, this is going to sound like I'm talking down to you. I promise you I'm not. You actually have to read these things. You have to sit down and you have to really think your way through it, because these journals are rough. They're typically very dense. They are not trying to appeal to you, and you're going to have to sit down with a pen and you're going to have to really stop and think about the things that they're saying. And you're also going to have to think a little bit more transformatively about your subjects. The stuff from Galileo is going to need to be shoehorned into your subject a little bit, because very rarely are you going to find somebody who's talking exactly about what you're discussing. So just real quick as an example, when we talk about a scholarly article, let's say we're talking about vaccines. Let's say you're talking about the vaccine, the rate at which vaccines protect you against COVID-19. Now, to be fair, when we're talking about COVID-19, there's probably going to be a dearth of information. You're probably going to be able to find anything you want. But here's an example of the type of transformativeness. Let's say all you could really find is an article about the yearly update to the influenza vaccine. If you're talking about the coronavirus vaccine and you get a lot of information about the influenza vaccine, do you think you might be able to use that in some capacity? It's very, very possible that you could find a way to connect these two topics and use the Galileo article, use the article from the scholarly journal, so that you can kind of sort of include this scholarly research into your own writing. And in fact, one of the things that I like to tell students is it's sometimes useful and like potentially lucrative to think transformatively about subjects in the first place. You don't want to fall into the trap of trying to find stuff that automatically factors into what you're talking about in an explicit way. Information can be made to work together in creative ways, right? So you'd have to sit down and really think about that article about influenza to find a way to make it say something about your topic, but it can be done. And that's one of the things good research writing does. It keeps its eye open to different ways that subjects can kind of interact and work with each other, right? The way that these kind of random things can kind of sort of inform and help each other and help us kind of say something that we might not have said before. So like I said, I'm not going to leave you with a discussion question today, but I do want you to log on to Galileo and start playing with it. Start working with it, because on Thursday, I'm going to ask you to do something very specific with Galileo, and it's going to be developed. So go ahead, make sure you can access Galileo. If you have problems doing that, let me know and I will help you. It should be okay, but let's just go ahead and test this connection and make sure everyone can get there. I really want to play City Skylines on my Xbox S. I love that game. I've only played it for like 15 minutes, but it's already like, one of my favorite things in the world. Today's not my video game day. Today's my day to read and write, which is like, I want to play games, but I also need to be productive and do things. I hate doing things. You guys have a great day.